This oral history of museum computing is provided by Layna White and was recorded on the 10th of May, 2021 by Paul Marty and Kathy Jones.
I began working in museums when I was studying information science at UCLA and got a part-time gig at the Grunwald Center for the Graphic Arts at UCLA and really did some hands-on work, got to apply at a part-time level. The work I was doing, studying in information science and namely thinking about cataloging artworks. And so that was that part-time gig back in 1989. There's a date, landed me then a full-time gig at the Grunwald Center for the Graphic Arts. And I stayed there for a long time, really 13 years, working principally to make access to that collection better, easier, whether it was through, cataloging, if you will, findability, but also working directly with faculty members and students to in their use of the collection. So I learned a heck of a lot from users of collections and how people want to use collections and how they look for things in collections, and lots of stuff around the care of collections, of course. So from spending 13 years at UCLA, I then moved up here being the Bay Area, to the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, and been at SF MoMA since 2003, which is quite remarkable to me. So my current role, I have dual roles now at SF MoMA. I am the director of collections. And I always like to say we have more than one collection at SF MoMA. We have the art collection, we have the library and archive collection, and we have a really cool collection of artist materials. This might be an example, might be a palette knife that came into the collection by one of the Bay Area artists. So it's like materials that artists use. It's a really cool collection. So my dual roles at SF MoMA are director of collections, and then also the head of a department called Collections, Information and Access, otherwise known as CIA. And that's where I spent have spent most of my time at San Francisco. I'll just quickly sketch out what those two roles mean. So director of collections, that's been since 2019 to the present. Wow, a couple of years. Leading a division comprised of 5 super highly functioning departments: conservation, registration, collections management, CIA. I have to say my favorite, although I probably shouldn't say that. And then the library and archive. So 5 departments. And together, those 5 departments, we are engaged in art stewardship, art exploration, art research, and art experiences. And in my other role, the head of CIA, which I've had since 2003, I oversee a department that works super cross-disciplinarily to develop digital records, all towards maximizing access and sharing of art and information for staff and for the public's benefit, right? So I would say my personal interests over the years has been to provide the best possible access to art that we can, whether that's in person. So thinking about my days at the Grunwald Center, working with faculty and students. So the best possible access to art in person, online, over time, and in different situations. So that's kind of been where I've been coming from. Like, how do we provide the best possible access to art? And as director of collections, I'll throw in and also provide the best possible care of that art, and also throw in how can we do all this so that it is humanly sustainable, environmentally sustainable, financially sustainable. So how can we do all these things being art access? And I thought for today, I would offer up 3 stories, highlight 3 stories. And I chose these stories because they are really focused on working collaboratively in order to make things happen. All right. So, and I also think these three stories are about experimenting, and all towards getting, if we can, increasing that access to art. So, just to hit the three stories, then I'll go into details. One, the first story is the Museums in the Online Archive of California, otherwise known as MOAC. And then leaping forward in time, um, a story around using Media Wiki as a thing, and also exactly, and then also a project called Send Me SF MoMA. So those are the three stories. So MOAC, the Museums in the Online Archive of California. This is a project that ran roughly from 1999 to 2007, and it had lots of good funding from the IMLS, which was great. I joined the project in 1999 as a member of the steering committee. And at that time, that's when I was working at the Grunwald Center at UCLA. So from roughly the part I'm going to focus on is the part from roughly 1999 to 2003. And that's when the steering committee members that we were led by Richard Reinhardt. Then at the time, he was at the Berkeley Art Museum slash Pacific Film Archive. So from 1999 to roughly around 2003, the steering committee folks worked on what we called MOAC Classic. So at its core, MOAC was about bringing together information about art, um, archive, and library collections into a shared space. So the idea was to bring those diverse types of collections into an online public space. In this case, that public space was the Online Archive of California, which is hosted by the University of California, comes out of the Office of the President there. I'll hit some of the partners in the MOAC endeavor. Were led by the Berkeley Art Museum Pacific Film Archive, and that was Rick Reinhardt and Gunter Weibel. Those were the key leaders of this project. The other teammates, I would say, were over at University of California, Riverside, the California Museum of Photography, and that partner there was Steve Thomas. A really wonderful place in Los Angeles, the Japanese American National Museum was a partner, and that partners there were Cameron Trowbridge and Snowden Becker, and also a longtime friend um, in and outside of the museum world. At the UC Berkeley Bancroft Library, Mary Ailings was one of our key partners at in MOAC. And in the Grunwald Center, we had a few other partners, but I would say those would that be five entities, I think were the kind of the main cohort. All right. So what was a challenge here? Well, the challenge was that, historically or traditionally, however you want to say it, museums, archives, libraries, we've used different data structures for describing our stuff, describing our collections, describing things within the collections. So what MOAC partners were really wanting to do was to explore and to experiment. So the idea on the table was, could we all use the same data structure, and could we use a data structure standard from the archive community to describe our collections and describe the things within our diverse collections, right? So specifically, we were experimenting with the idea of using the EAD, the encoded archival description. Could we use the EAD to bring our stuff together into this shared space? And that at the time was a super novel idea and experiment, right? And in fact, that experiment yielded content, and that content remains visible today in the Online Archive of California, and also discoverable through their new, what would they call it, like web project, I guess. It's more than a project, initiative, Calisphere. I don't know, though, how often the content is updated by the MOAC partners. I can guarantee, well, I probably is too strong of a word. I would suggest that the content from the Grunwald Center has not been updated. So that's an interesting point. Like, what happens when a project goes away, I guess, you know. So this was 1999 to 2003, a big rush to get content onto this shared space, the Online Archive of California. And then, so my God, that's now, I mean, I'm not good at math, but I think that's, we're almost at 18 years ago. Is that right? Holy, that is striking, right? So the content is being maintained. I mean, it's accessible, but I'm not so sure that content is being updated, which is interesting. Um, so how one of the remarkable things that happened in this, that I think was remarkable, that happened in this project, was that the Grunwald at the time, having really very limited in-house IT support, we were able to get, or I was able to get, content into the Online Archive of California, in large part because of a tool that the Berkeley Art Museum team built. And this would have been Rick and Gunter, and I believe Orlando Sanchez at Berkeley also had a hand in this. They built a FileMaker Pro database essentially. And this tool, I mean, I might be exaggerating, but I feel like it was like almost out of a push of a button. Once you got your content into this tool, it pushed the content out into the into an EAD finding aid. And I don't think that the Grunwald would have been able to participate in a project like this without having a tool that they, such as this, that they made. So that made it super, super easy to do. Just going to call out a couple of things about this project that I think are noteworthy. That project, that partnership really jump started literally the Grunwald's ability to get a little bit of its collection on the web. So that partnership really was the key to getting that collection, at least part of it, onto the web. Again, we had extremely limited in-house technology support, and it would have been a really long time had we not been involved in MOAC to get some of the stuff online. So a major love to the MOAC team for doing that. I would also say, kind of on a personal level, the Grunwald was a super, super small place. And I was left alone I was the person, I was left alone in a good way, I suppose. I was left alone, and I was the person that worked on the content to get 3 finding aids for the Grunwald contributed to the OIC via that tool. And when I say I think it was a good thing, it also can, one might also say, it's like, was that really a good thing? Because what happened is it allowed the content, it allowed progress to be made, right? I was given, I was trusted, and also made it, the project got done while everyone else was doing many other things, right? So why would it not be a good thing? Because when I left, I took that knowledge with me about how to operate the tool that was developed by Berkeley. And I also perhaps I took some of the energy about participating in the OAC with me, right? And also in hindsight now, right? It could have very well, a singular operator uh, introducing perhaps lots of biases in that content into the choices made that were in the selection of content that went into the words that were used to describe the content. So it's kind of interesting to think about that dual thing. Like it enabled the project to get done because I could focus on it and I was trusted to do it. That was great. It happened. And then I took it with me. I took the knowledge with me about that project and the use of the tool in this case. So that's MOAC. That's my story. That's my story on MOAC.
Let me just jump in and say that there's a lot of connections to philosophical themes that we've heard throughout these oral histories, just in what you've said there and MOAC, right? This idea that interinstitutional cooperatives help maybe some of the smaller museums make progress, right, in ways that they wouldn't be able to before. This theme of losing institutional knowledge, right? We've heard that a lot as well. And this idea that, it's, you mentioned about, it maybe Moac still being updated or whatever. The key thing is not the product. The key thing is the process, what we learn by doing this project.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting to reflect on too. I am not, absent MOAC, I can guarantee that SF MoMA is not using. So now that I took my knowledge with me to SF MoMA, right? Um, the art collection, we are not using the EAD to describe our, I mean, it's interesting too to think about that process. And it was an experiment, right? And it's an experiment that is still remains visible. And, is it something, a less, what, hmm, it was an experiment. What did we learn? Is it a viable? And also standards have moved on, right? Other standards have moved on, right? Beyond EAD. Um, let's see. Yes. Thank you for asking. So Kathy is asking about when I left the Grunwald. I think I don't really know the answer to that because I will, just to be really frank, I took my energy and placed it in SF MoMAs. I took all my energy and all my concentration and I moved it into SF MoMA. Um, I don't necessarily think, I think the answer there is no. I think the answer there is no, but I could be wrong. I don't want to misspeak about that. I would just say that I took all my energy and placed my energy to what I was doing at SF MoMA. Yeah, good question though. All right, I'm going to move to story number 2. All right, okay. All right, story number 2 is about Media Wiki. All right, so exactly, super exciting. So in 2012, 2012, SF MoMA began experimenting with using Media Wiki as a platform, especially as a means of documenting very complex, variable artworks. And this experiment was born out of frustration, like so many like so many experiments, right? This was an experiment that was born out of the frustration with our then collections management system. Although I think it's safe to say that it would, no matter what collections management system the museum had been using in 2012, it would have been the same frustration with the kind of collections management systems that are on the market too for museums, right? So it's born out of a frustration with the collections management system to really capture the nature and I'll say the evolution of artworks that can change over time, that are variable, that can be displayed in any number of ways. All right, so for example, the collections management system may have been pretty good at answering really direct questions that start with like, how many works in the collection, you know, which works in the collection were on view, that kind of stuff. But they weren't, the collection management system we had at the time really wasn't that good at helping us tell stories about an artwork, about how an artwork might change over time. Again, how it might be installed differently each time we install it, right? So what we saw in Media Wiki as a potential platform for this kind of work and for what we were aiming for, we saw it as a space that could help us make and keep very inclusive, multi-voiced, living or active records for artworks that can change. These would be records that can communicate and show context, that are more narrative in style, much more narrative than a database can be. So the Media Wiki, just to be clear, we started experimenting in 2012. It does not replace our collections management system or our digital asset management system, for example, but it's situated adjacent to it, I would say. It is a tool that we use, again, thinking about how you can narrate a story, how you can provide context around what you want to say about an artwork and how it's been changing. All right. So when it's super cooking with gas, I would say our Media Wiki, it's powered by interdepartmental collaborations between departments like conservation, so conservators, registration, registrars, our installation team, like our preparators, for example, certainly our curators and our information managers. So when it's cooking and doing really well, and but what do I mean by cooking? I mean when people are adding to it, contributing what they know to the Media Wiki. It's a really, really active space, right? Really juicy. I'm trying to think of other things, cooking, juicy, you get the idea. Um, I should pause there and say that there were two people on staff who were really principally responsible for getting our Media Wiki off the ground. Former, that's a keyword, put a pin in that, former media conservator Martina Heidvogel. And she's now teaching at the University of Bern in Switzerland, and also our media consultant on staff, I guess he was a consultant, and now he's on staff. Media programmer, I would say, in our IT team, Mark Heller. Those two were our champions and our shepherds back in 2012. So I'm going to call out a few things about the Media Wiki here, one of which is unlike MOAC, our Media Wiki is very, very much an internal tool, right? It doesn't have an external facing view into it. It's limited in its visibility. It's visible within SF MoMA. It does have extremely limited visibility, like outside of SF MoMA, a person would need to be whitelisted into access. We're limiting the access to our Media Wiki has been limited. I think because we're trying to protect ourselves too much from being messy. I would like to see us be less concerned with being too conservative. So let me start out by, let me go back and say, what do I mean by that? By limiting its visibility, I think what we're saying or we're showing is that we're uncomfortable with showing incompleteness or uncertainty or a certain lack of polish. Um, Similarly, we don't, our collections management system is not exposed externally, right? But the Media Wiki has so much to offer towards that contextualization and toward that narration and toward our desire to have it be multi-voiced, that certainly we would wish, and everyone, most people believe in this, that we would want artists and designers and other museum professionals at other museums, for example, or experts at other museums to weigh in on what they know about an artwork. But I think we're being a little too conservative and a little too cautious because it's not very polished. It's not a polished space. It is incomplete. And P.S., the artworks in and of themselves are incomplete. And so I would like to see us as a team move more into a space where we can expose the Media Wiki much more grandly to the outside world because it has so much to offer. All right. So it is messy. I think, oh, sorry, were you going to ask something, Paul?
I was just going to jump
Yeah.
in and say that that's
Yeah.
another theme that we've been hearing a lot too, this need to capture those multiple voices and perspectives, store them someplace where they're accessible and make them available, and how hard that is for a lot of museums to do.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because we so much say that's what we want to do, but we haven't proven it. And I'm just speaking when I say we, I mean at SF MoMA, right? We haven't proven we believe in it, but we haven't proven that we're ready to do it, like that we're okay with it, right? And this is a great example. I think our Media Wiki around these complex works, um, it just offers so much. It just begs for that external. We have some champions internally, like a handful of the curators that are involved in this see it that way too. And some don't, some want to keep it more protected. So I just think we need to be more comfortable sharing our work in progress because it is a work in progress, right? And I think that we should be comfortable with that. And to your point about inviting other voices in, super, super key. I would say that we are going back to what I was saying about put a pin in it. So it's no longer an experiment. So 2012. So we are so committed to keeping the Media Wiki adjacent to our collections management system and adjacent part of our ecosystem, right? Our information ecosystem. It needs care and feeding, like to be cooking with gas. I'm mixing all sorts of metaphors here, like any kind of system, right? So one of the issues is that one of its shepherds, Martina, one of the persons that one of the people that was the shepherd, the motivator, kind of like the energy behind it. Now she's in Switzerland. She's teaching. She's got another gig, and I will say frankly that it's gotten, since the year that Martina left the museum, the Media Wiki's gotten quiet, right? So it's gotten a little quiet. The kitchen's kind of been closed. Going back to that cooking analogy. And so what do we, how do we, it's similar to the MOAC situation, right? Where you've got someone who's the champion and the motivator leaving. So it's present in our minds a lot. How do we keep the Media Wiki alive and cooking? But it's a challenge. We could certainly it could certainly benefit from having a champion, a shepherd, to encourage its regular use, right? That champion can be me. I'm not sure I can be the shepherd, right? I don't know if I can be the shepherd given um, given the given what else I do. I guess I'll say it that way. I don't know. Call me crazy. I don't know. Uh, yeah, exactly, right? It's exactly it. Needs that, again, Kathy, that energy, right? That energy that can power and sustain a project and a program, right? That's what you need. And I think, is it one person or is it many people? I think it's good to have, going back to the lesson from when I was at the Grunwald, more than one person, more than a shared energy would be good. Shepherds. All right. Okay, story number 3. Send me SF MoMA. All right. So this is the story of the awesome potential of the very humble tag, right? Super awesome. Uh, so gosh, I'm looking at, I have these markers like 12 years ago, 13 years ago. Here's another one. roughly 12 years ago at SF MoMA, the CIA department, so Collections, Information, and Access. Well over 12 years ago, we started a very concerted effort to add tags to artworks in the collection, and this effort continues today. So what do I mean by tags? It's principally subject matter, and I'll tease it apart a little bit. This work has been, to give a huge shout out, this work has been done principally through the efforts of Marla Masunas and her team of documentation specialists in CIA. Two, I'll name Margaret Kendrick and Ian Gill, as well as interns, many interns over the years at SF MoMA. So in this effort, it's similar to the Media Wiki in some ways. We totally embrace the approach and the idea of having people from different perspectives, bringing different observations, having many different people add tags, right? So looking for different perspectives. So that's why the work has been led by Marla, Margaret, Ian, and interns, but we also are really keen to get folks from around SF MoMA. So our frontline staff, for example, our visitor services staff adding tags. There's been engagements with local high school teachers to talk with them about tags that would be beneficial to help them and their students find artwork. All right. So very generally speaking, over these years, we've been tagging what we see or who we see in an artwork. So literally naming the things that are visible in an artwork. So that is naming what we see, I'll say, as opposed to naming emotions or sensibilities or concerns or concepts, things that are more personal, I guess. So we've literally been naming things. All right. So why weren't we up until recently naming things like emotions and concepts, etc.? Because that seemed, as I said, a little too personal, too interpretive. That seemed that way. So put a pin in that. So then, going to fast forward to um, 2017. In 2017, that's when former staff member Jay Malika created this really snappy, successful text messaging application called Send Me SF MoMA. So that was 2017. And how it worked, I'm going to try to summarize it as best I can, is that you basically opened up your text messaging service and sent a text to this number, to our number. You sent a text that started with send me, and you filled in the blank with a word or a phrase. And in return, SF MoMA sent you an image of an artwork that responded to that word or phrase that you entered. So the number one request, for example, was send me love. And so when a person texted send me love to our number, Jay wrote an application that randomly chose an artwork, an image of an artwork based on the tags that Marla and Margaret and Ian and interns and many other around the building had added to the collections management system, right? So our tags fueled what got returned, as well as our images, fueled our tags in response, in return. So the thing with the thing with Send Me SF MoMA that was super valuable for us, and maybe you could see it a mile away, was that if you remember when I said that we had up until then been tagging what we saw in an image, but here the number one request was send me love, which we hadn't been tagging because it was so personal, because it was so interpretive. So the cool thing was that Send Me SF MoMA was super valuable for us because it surfaced absences in our tags or absences in how we were tagging, right? So it also underscored how important it is for us to take really fresh looks at what we're doing. In this case, what we were doing around tagging, right? You could also extrapolate that to what we're doing in terms of providing access to the collection online, right? Are we providing access to the collection online that people are actually, are we providing access the extent to which people are actually desiring of that? Boy, that was a strange way of phrasing that sentence. Are we providing the access to the collection that is helpful, that is relevant to individuals who seek out works of art, right? All right, so the Send Me SF MoMA project, it really, those queries that were coming, it so much influenced how we were tagging. It so much influenced us in our expanding our tags to include aboutness, right? So the team continues today to still tag the things that are seen in an artwork, but the team is also now very enthusiastically and very readily tagging emotions and sensibilities and concerns and concepts, whether they are suggested or believed. So it really, that whole project was so incredibly valuable that it also got us thinking about, are our tags biased, right? Are our tags relatable? Are they relevant to our audiences and staff? And we saw it firsthand through this send me fill in the blank. So some of the things that we saw when we looked at our tags were things like we were adding more names of men than women. So this literally what we saw in the pieces, right? What we saw in the artwork. And one might ask, why might that be? Is that because we recognize the names of men, but is that because we recognize the men who are being portrayed in the artworks or not? Or does it say something about what we were collecting? We also saw very specialist, I would call it specialist terminology, something that an intern called out as being having an education, perhaps an education gap in what we were using. So an example might be instead of one of our tags might have been chanteuse, or is that, I don't speak French, so hopefully chanteuse, chanteuse, yes. It's
Chanteuse.
chanteuse, yes. So instead of using the tag chanteuse, should we not have used the tag singer, right? Or something, right? Or maybe both. So this was a lesson learned, right? What we were doing. Um, there were many things that were learned about through Send Me SF MoMA that were so incredibly valuable. So I will say before I go into, I want to call out a handful of things about Send Me SF MoMA. I will say the museum retired it. We sunsetted Send Me SF MoMA in February of 2020. And some of the one principal driver there was the cost, because each of the texts, there was a cost to those texts. Literally, like a bill was received from the museum, or to the museum, right? Also, it felt like it was time to look for creative ways of using the collection look for other ways of experimenting. So it was sunsetted. So I just want to call out with Send Me SF MoMA, call out how it was such an unexpected and super beautiful payoff for that 12 plus year concerted effort around tagging, right? And really really experimenting and finding a fresh new way of making art accessible in a way we hadn't even seen coming, right? Through text and sending images. It was just a delightful, it was really a delightful project. Um, yeah, so that's the one call out I would say. I mean, it was, I think of all the projects that I've talked about, MOAC, Media Wiki for sure, and Send Me SF MoMA. This one, Send Me SF MoMA, had the most visibility. So if we go back to like behind the scenes, behind the scenes, backstage, making the invisible work visible. I think of all the three stories, Send Me SF MoMA really had great visibility, created a lot of attention around the work that we do.
I have a couple of questions for you about that.
Yeah.
One is, I put in chat, how many tags were you able to put in and into what database? So that's one. And then followed that with, how did the team work together to do that type of cumulative tagging? How did you get together to discuss that?
Yeah, great. Thank you. So I'll go with the easiest one first. So the database is the collections management system. That's where like the source is, right? Tags show up, tags are entered into our collections management system. They show up in our digital asset management system too, right? So there's an integration there. So tags are present in our digital asset management system and can be searched there. Tags are not visible on the interface, but working behind the scenes in our online collection. So they are being indexed. They aren't visible on the pages that a user sees when they do a search on our online collection, but they are driving some of the results there. And then the tags, I know that as of 2018, because we did some work around like, are our tags biased? And we were literally looking at all of our tags. And in 2018, we had 11,000 tags. And so I'm guessing that we're 3 years later, and I would guess that we would have at least 500 to maybe not 1,000 more, but at least 500 more. We not controlled vocabulary. It is freestyle, man, and it is something that we've known about the excitement about being freestyle, and also the downside there is because you might get some misspellings, you might get, you know, all the things that we know about, but it's proven very powerful to do it this way. So then I'll go to do it this way. How? Like, what's that about? I would have to go back in my memory. Maybe you guys will help me out here. The project, oh my gosh, that was how can I blank on the name of this project? The Steve Project. Yes. So that would be really something to think if Steve was wrapping up in 2012, because I might peg it to the Steve Project. So the Steve Project really energized us even more to work to do tagging. So how did we work together? So I would say, if I would kind of anchor it in the Steve Project, and that's the project where a bunch of museums said, let's get together. I'm paraphrasing. Hopefully one of your oral history folks talked about the Steve Project, perhaps, I hope. Bunch of museums got together and said, let's contribute images of artwork. Yes.
I was going to jump in and say we got a fantastic oral history from Marla as well, and she talked about SF MoMA's early connections to the Steve Project. So
Perfect.
but yes, absolutely.
Yes. Okay. So Marla, so just connect. You'll have that in Marla's reflections then. But really born out of that, one of the things that we learned from the Steve Project is going back to that. We embrace lots of voices here. We want multiple perspectives, and I think that's what we got from the Steve Project, right? What would happen if we asked the public, or let me rephrase that. What would happen if we asked people that weren't us to add tags to artworks, right? And so it was really born out. I was like, what do we have to lose? Let's do it. In fact, it's much to be gained. So multiple perspectives. The other thing that we learned was this, that when we look at tags, can we say to ourselves, would someone be surprised if I use this tag to attach it to an artwork, and someone were to retrieve this artwork, would they be surprised that they retrieved it, or would it make sense to them? So we did learn some lessons having worked with the Steve Project that we carried forward into our own work. And so literally, I mean, if we got really particular about this, Marla and her cohorts of documentation specialists are having conversations with people about tagging, and really suggesting, just let it all hang out. You know, we have a few rules, like mind your spelling. You know, we prefer plural over singular. So there's some formatting, but we really are letting individuals do what they wish, and with some of our guidelines. So it is an ongoing, I don't know, I think it would be like, I don't know if I call it training, but I would call it encouragement. We don't review the tags. So yeah, I don't know if this is helping, but it's not quite the Wild West, but it's getting close. Yeah.
I'll just jump in and say, it's a natural evolution, I think, of the key research that came out of the Steve Project. Whenever it comes up in class, what I tell my students is the only thing you need to know about the Steve Project is that it proved conclusively that the way the general public thinks about museum collections does not overlap at all with the way museum curators think about museum collections.
Yeah, chanteuse. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But it showed the value of tags for opening that up, and it showed, and I think this is a really important point that you raised here, Layna, it shows the holes in how the data is organized behind the scenes, the information organization. If the museum doesn't record this information, but the visitors want that information, then there has to be some way to bridge that gap.
Exactly. One thing that's interesting is that, I would say 5 years ago, before our most recent website redesign, our tags were visible on the object pages in the online collection. And there was, around 5 years ago, a couple of the curators raised their hand and said they weren't quite comfortable. This gets back into this comfort level about showing the tags on the object pages. So Marla, I know for sure, is a huge advocate of like, we need to make the tags visible, right? Because I mean, for many reasons. And so it's interesting having come back to this, reflecting on the Media Wiki and the museum folks's comfort level with just like letting it, just being transparent and showing what we're doing. Yeah, gets back into like, I love it. Coming full circle. It's like we are on the scene. We're not behind this. This is not behind the scenes. Like we are on the scene. So let's make it visible.
And that's certainly another theme that we've heard a lot as well. This fear of putting our data out there, and how do you overcome that? That's tricky.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I just think we need to be comfortable because it's such a work in progress, right? It's such a work in progress. And, I think that's a simple message that we can find a way to convey to the world, right? That it's a work in progress. Yeah.
And the other thing I was just about to say is another important theme that you touched upon here. In fact, Layna, I'm taking notes. I think you've hit upon almost every key theme that Kathy and I have been talking about. These stories are spectacular. Another key theme is challenging our assumptions about the user's needs and expectations, right? How people will use a system like SF MoMA. It connects to a fantastic story we heard from Andrea Ledesma at the Field Museum, because she talked about how she built the text chat app for Maximo, the dinosaur there. And they had all the answers to questions pre-written. Of course, did the users ask any of those questions? No, the users asked the dinosaur, where's the bathroom?
You gotta love it. You have to, that is so beautiful, right? Oh my God. That is so, so cool. I know it's such an interesting thing about being like, how do we connect? I mean, I think that we say, and I'll just say we, who do I mean by we? I mean SF MoMA. And I know that our team believes so much in being connected with our audiences. So let's show it, right? So let's do it. Let's ask. Yeah. Yeah. It's super, you need, where are we putting our energy? And we don't know everything, right? By far, far from it, far from it. Yeah. All right. You've got all my stories.